2023 year in review. I've stopped doing a lot of React mainly because I haven't been watching a lot of the games. I watched maybe some of them, maybe slightly less than half of them, and other ones I'm sort of paying attention to. Like I've been doing skiing and doing other things, and I put the game on when the radio, but I'm not watching it. I don't get to see what happens, so I sort of partially understand what's going on. But there, there's a few things that I can talk about, and I could talk about 2023 as a year in review. What a terrible year. The best thing to happen out of 2023 was firing Brad Larson. Second best thing to happen out of 2023 was not firing, but firing Mike Babcock. So glad that Mike Babcock never had a chance to be on this team. And then we have Pascal Vincent, whose result performance is unclear to say the least. So we have a lot more bad things to say than good things. Sean Corrali, we have no idea what the state of Sean Corrali's injury is, how severe this is going to be overall. Um, Patrick Laine, there's nothing to talk about compared to Patrick Laine. Lots of people were talking about how Patrick Laine wasn't playing well, and they exaggerated. Although Patrick Laine, could be playing better and wasn't playing consistently, but this is Patrick Laine. He's played better than a lot of people gave him credit for. And Johnny Gaudreau has turned it on somewhat, not to the level that he needs to turn it on, obviously. Elvis Merzlikins, I haven't looked at the numbers. I'm doing this pretty impromptu, but I've been fairly impressed with Elvis Merzlikins. He's performing the way that I expect him to. He does seem to get sick a lot with just like the flu. I don't know what that's about. Is he's got a bad immune system, or if that's just some stuff that's going around the team right at the moment. Um, but I think as a fan, you have to be fairly pleased with the progression of Elvis Merzlikins. To be honest, this is kind of what I expected from him. I expected Elvis to be serviceable for this team, and there are some times when he's been outstanding, even in games when I was watching and then I was not in the right frame of mind to make a video because which game was it? Um, Not the Toronto game. There was another game where the Jackets were just crushing. I think it was against the Devils a couple of weeks ago or last week, where the Jackets were up like 3-1, and then the Devils came back and won the game in overtime. And Elvis Merzlikins played a phenomenal game that game, even though the Devils managed to come back in the game in the last couple of minutes, which is of course something that has happened over and over and over again to this team that seems to get tired at the end of games. Although not always. Sometimes they've shown a lot of energy, but out of the 40 odd games they've played so far, when you give up, multiple goal leads in the third period on 15 of them, that's a pretty noticeable pattern. I'm making those numbers up. I don't know if that's exactly right. Um, a guy who I haven't talked as much about. I've talked a lot about Dmitry Voronkov and the kind of game he's had, and he's had actually some quiet games. Although I still think he plays pretty well from what I've seen of him. But the guy who's lit up the score sheet is a guy that I overlooked a little bit, but we shouldn't be overlooking Yegor Chinekhov. Um, we all known what Yegor Chinekhov can do, and a lot of people talked about Yegor Chinekhov as having sort of a struggling rookie season, which is not true. His expected goal numbers and stuff like that were very good. He just got very bad puck luck for that first season. He had like I don't know, at least 20 shots that could have been goals. Really pretty high likelihood of being goals, and that weren't. And so I don't think that we were too worried about Yegor Chinekhov, and of course that line has been the best line, the highest energy line for the Jackets. The other line that's getting a lot of attention as being finding the right combination of players is the Kent Johnson line. Kent Johnson and um, uh, Emil Bemstrom, and who else goes on there? I think the other player has flipped around a little bit, but uh, oh, Cole Sillinger, right? So all three of those guys are interesting. Cole Sillinger recently has been on kind of a hot streak, and I think it's tempting looking at last season to look at Cole Sillinger as being sort of a sophomore slump, but when you have prospects like this, all three of these guys, and also Alexander Texier to some extent, are in a situation where these prospects are underperformed, but they're still prospects. They're still somewhat young, especially Cole Sillinger and Kent Johnson are young. Texier and Bemstrom have been getting up there for a little while, and who's the other one? Forgot again. Yeah, okay, Texier and Bemstrom, Sillinger, and Johnson. So Sillinger and Johnson are still very young, and you still hope that these guys develop in a progression where they can increase their reliability. Both Sillinger and Johnson, you would describe this of, and you would also describe this of Texier and Bemstrom. Probably of the four, the most consistent energy comes from Texier, and then second, Kent Johnson. Although Kent Johnson has looked poor at a lot of points prior to this season. He looked like he wasn't the kind of player that the Jackets expect him to eventually be. And Bemstrom has looked that way almost his entire career. Like he's not the kind of scorer that they expect him to be. So some of the reporting about the Johnson Sillinger Bemstrom line is that Emil Bemstrom found line mates with a slower pace of play, where it didn't work to put Emil Bemstrom with Johnny Gaudreau or something like that. Although I think Emil Bemstrom was pretty good with Boone Jenner. Everybody's playing pretty good with Boone Jenner, where Boone Jenner is a legitimate net front guy, something that doesn't seem like there's anyone else in the Jackets that has that clear role. Maybe Voronkov. Voronkov has that role as well, but that line is clicking. Don't mess with this line. And of course, Jenner will be back whenever. I don't know. Maybe they can. These guys don't really care that much about who they're on a line with, whether there's chemistry on a line, what the other guy's pace of play is. It's the NHL. It has to play a fast game. If they're not playing a fast game, then they're not going to get the puck. The other team's going to get the puck, and then they'll be playing defense. And they all know that. I think that Bemstrom might be closer to the end of his rope than definitely than Sillinger and Johnson, and probably more than Texier, just because Texier plays with more energy. Texier is a more dynamic setup player. Not to say that Bemstrom isn't playing hard, but he's just sort of average. Bemstrom is mid at being aggressive on the pucks. We've seen that Bemstrom has a good shot sometimes, but he needs to play more aggressively than what he's doing. And I think that the chatter about the successful line combination has a lot to do with Cole Sillinger getting hot. It may have a lot to do with Kent Johnson. Kent Johnson's stint in the AHL and his development as a player. But that'll be... Emil Bemstrom has always been an interesting guy to watch to see what kind of performance he will actually produce on the NHL level. And that has been true since he came over from the Swedish Elite League and made this team. He's always been an X factor. He still is. I think, I mean, I'm not looking at what can happen for this season. When I think about this team and think about these players, I think about who's going where in the future. Uh, these, some of these guys are going to be not under contract, and some of these guys don't have a place in the long term future of the team. And Justin Danforth is a great example who I've talked about before. Brendan Gaunce is another example who's a similar age to Danforth. They're both too old. Justin Danforth has played great. He's played really hard this whole season. But Justin Danforth doesn't have a long-term place in this team. But Ken Johnson and Cole Sillinger do. And it's reasonable to start asking these questions about what about Alexander Texier? What about Emil Bemstrom? And what about some of these other guys? And where can you envision 2 years from now? Probably is the right time scale. 2 years from now, in the 2025-2026 season, where does the offense come from among this group of forwards? I'd love to see Texier still being on the team and producing well. I'd love to. We will see Sillinger and Kent Johnson still on the team, and we'll see what those players are made of. We can already tell that Fantilli will still be there. If they can get all the contract stuff and keep the Russian players happy, all of Voronkov and Chinakhov and Marchenko should still be there. Although some of those guys are RFAs, then they might decide at some point to return to the KHL instead of staying in North America, which would be awfully disappointing for this team. But they want to win, and this team is not doing a lot of winning. Hopefully they see the path forward. Hopefully Jarmo sees the path forward as well with these guys. Jarmo obviously thinks about these kinds of things all the time, but sometimes his decision making is baffling. As is the case why how long it took the team to give up on Eric Robinson. Defensively, a lot of people have been talking about how Ivan Provorov and Damon Severson are not what they were billed as. That might be true to some extent of Damon Severson. I don't buy this for Provorov. I think Provorov has been outstanding. Often Provorov hasn't had a lot of help. Provorov has definitely been the team's best defenseman, defensively and probably offensively as well. If you want to blame somebody for not being what they're supposed to be, there's also a lot of chatter about Zach Werenski, and that's much more warranted. And first of all, Zach Werenski's injured a lot. It seems like he's I don't know what it is about these guys that are injury prone. Why that is. I'm not necessarily saying that this is Zach Werenski's fault, but when he's not injured, he doesn't produce at the level of an $11 million defenseman. I guess he's making 10 million something. Seth Jones is the guy they wanted to resign, and they couldn't. And so they said re-sign Zach Werenski instead. They probably wanted to re-sign them both, but they're going to have to pay both. And if you're going to have to pay both of them, Seth Jones was the better defenseman. Seth Jones and Werenski were paired together, which made Werenski better. It also made Werenski be able to be the rover, to be the offensive defenseman in the play all the time. And we see that dynamism from Werenski. I've said this many times before. Zach Werenski shouldn't have ever been playing as a defenseman when he was playing in juniors. He should have been a forward. He's a good skater. He doesn't have that much of the defensive instinct. He's a good supportive defenseman in a when the personnel is right, and he was really good with Seth Jones. And it would have been nice if those two guys had realized that they were really good together and stayed together, but that's not what Seth Jones wanted to do. And Zach Werenski is not a $10 million player. I wasn't sure if he was at the time. I was dubious. I thought that they didn't re-sign the right guy, and I didn't know what they wanted to do. At the time, I guess I wasn't as critical of the move as at the time that as I could have been, because I understood that they wanted to keep at least one of the two of Jones and Werenski, and so they had to pay Werenski. But I think the contract doesn't look too good, and Zach Werenski's performance doesn't look too good. He's not really the number one super defenseman, and he's not a defensive defenseman. Ivan Provorov has had that role, and Ivan Provorov has played really well. Um, Damon Severson is another guy that you bring in, and you want to criticize Yarmo for overpaying Damon Severson. I think the jury's out a little bit on it. Damon Severson has been hurt. He just got back. Um, you know, I think Damon Severson has room for his game to improve. We can put it that way. Which, that's maybe not what the Jackets were expecting. But Damon Severson is a good player. But he's gotten beat sometimes defensively. He's not always the most solid of defensemen ever. Um, Erica Branson. Erica Branson probably doesn't have a role on the future of the team going forward. He's old. He's a veteran. Um, we'll see. We'll see about Jake Bean. Some of these other guys are definitely in we will see territory. We'll see what they come up with. Another guy who I wanted to talk about, who is has a lot of attention and is getting to play all the time, is David Jiricek. David Jiricek has looked so-so this year a lot of the time. He doesn't look as involved as I would like him to be. Um, Maybe a little bit like Andrew Peeke. He's a little too defensive, too much of the time. Hopefully, he can learn from guys like Provorov, who strikes this balance really well, and less from guys like Werenski, who doesn't strike this balance really well, and be more of a offensively skilled player than what we've seen so far from David Jiricek. David Jiricek is another guy. He's very young. He has a lot of time for his game to improve, but he's another guy. Where is he going to be in 2 years when this franchise should be looking to say, okay, we're gonna try to be competing, not this year, but in the near future, maybe as soon as next year. David Jiricek hasn't shown me that much yet, but I'm not ready to. I wasn't ready to dump on Andrew Peeke immediately. I'm not ready to dump David Jiricek immediately, but he's not nearly as visible as I would like him to be. All right, I will try to watch more games and do more reviews, but I might not. I might not do them all. I'm going to keep doing other things with my life instead of devoting a lot of time to watching this team at the moment. But I'll watch. Of course, I'll watch them here and there when I'm not otherwise doing other things. Because I'm obsessed like that. And when I do, I'll try to make videos more consistently as opposed to just like not doing it.